Hi, everyone. I'm Deanne Barrett, and I am here with Cher Brasok. Welcome, Cher.
Hi, good morning, Deanne.
Well, you would never know it from the computers, but Cher and I are actually in the same city here in Calgary. And I actually just have to tell you the crazy story of how Cher and I met. I was at the public library with my kids, and I saw an announcement of Cher's work. And Cher is the founder of Connect to Your Calm. And Cher is so skilled in being able to help people learn how to manage the stress of modern day living. So Cher, I'll let you tell us a whole lot more about that and the work that you do in schools and in the community to help people really live a life that feels good.
Sounds good. Great. And first, I'd like to say thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. I know you're doing a lot of work within our community, and it's great when kind of like minds can come together to support the people in our communities that need it the most. So specifically with Connect to Your Calm, I officially launched the workshop in spring of 2016. And since then, I've been facilitating workshops in schools for students as young as grade 5 and all the way through, the elementary years, junior high and high school. I've also done sessions with students and parents together, because there's a really amazing learning that happens when you're learning about these things together, as well as sessions for teachers in schools and school staff. Because whether you're 10 or you're 18 or you're 40, the strategies aren't age specific. So anyone of any age can, practice and apply the things that we talk about in my sessions. And when I first launched, or when I first had the idea for the workshop, my passion, my mission is to really be able to introduce students at a relatively young age to a variety of things that they can do to help themselves when they are feeling overwhelmed or scared of their feelings. So if you are feeling really nervous or anxious or frustrated about something, if you're feeling overwhelmed, the kind of the catch-all phrase that the students say, like when they're stressing out about something, that's like, that doesn't feel good. And when you're feeling, let's say like a level 8 of overwhelm or frustration, that doesn't feel very good. It can be overwhelming. And if we are afraid of our emotions, and if we feel unable to cope with our emotions, we become afraid of them, and we don't know what to do with them. We feel like we can't cope, so we either avoid them or we shove them inside, and we know that that's not the healthy way to deal with it. So by using a couple of very simple, very effective strategies to kind of bring that down to like a level 2 or 3, at that level, our emotions feel very differently in our bodies. Our brains respond very differently. And at that level 2 or 3, we just feel like we're so much better able to cope with whatever it is that we are feeling. Now, the good news is that our students, they already have a lot of really great strategies in place. They have a really stressful day, they come home and they put on their favorite music, or they watch TV, or, they go for a run, or they shoot some hoops. And those are all fantastic, because those are all healthy ways to cope with stress. But my challenge for them is, what are you doing in the moment of? So something happens at school, and something's happened with your friends, and you're really anxious now, you're really upset of it. What are you doing for yourself in that moment? Or if you're someone that struggles with exams, and that pressure of exams brings on that anxiety, what are you doing for yourself in those moments while that teacher is walking throughout the classroom and putting that test paper down in front of you? You don't have to let yourself, be afraid of if you're feeling nervous, because there's things that you can do for yourself in that moment. And so that's the big focus in the session, is what are we doing for ourselves in the moment of, so that we're not just waiting till the end of the day or till the end of the week till we de-stress about stuff.
So can you give us one quick strategy? What can students do when they're, sitting there just in the stew of emotions, waiting for their teacher to put that test paper on their page? What can they do?
You know what? The easiest thing is something that we already do all day, every day, and we don't even think about it, and is learning how to breathe. It can literally be as simple as taking 3 long, slow, deep breaths. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's surprising how few people do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it together right now.
It is 30 seconds, not even 30 seconds that they can. And the beautiful thing about it is that no one around them even needs to know what's going on. It's not going to be a really obvious thing of, oh, look at me, I'm stressing out before the test, right? It's something they can do to instantly just kind of calm their bodies. And when body feels calm, your mind will feel calmer, and just things will just go so much smoother after that.
So let's take some deep breaths together. What do we need? Is there a thing we need to focus on when we're breathing deeply?
You know what, for this one, I like to keep it. I mean, there's in my session itself, I talk about a number of different ways that you can breathe, but sometimes when you're in that moment, you don't want to have to think about doing things right and following certain steps. So I would just simply say, just take 3 long, slow, deep breaths, whatever that means to you.
Okay, let's do it. And whoever is watching, join us, and just notice how you're feeling right now. And let's take 3 deep breaths together and then just feel how we feel afterwards. Let's do it.
Sounds good. And sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah, it felt like a much longer time
Mm-hmm.
than I would have expected 3 breaths to actually take. Yeah, I felt like I could feel a lot more of the tension in my shoulders just kind of fall away because I was just breathing and, was like letting it go.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing about giving your mind and your body something else to focus on is that it will enable the students not to be sitting there and let their minds get going about, oh my gosh, having this test. What if I don't do well on this test? What's going to happen? Because that in itself will create a lot of stress in the moment.
I just was reading a really great book by Dr. Christopher Willard, and it's about mindfulness
Yes.
for teens with anxiety. And
Yeah.
one of the things he says, which I love, is that many teens who struggle with anxiety are really creative, generate a lot of ideas, but part of the problem is a lot of those ideas and thoughts are really anxious thoughts. And I thought, and he describes it as, a smart brain run amok when they're experiencing all of this anxiety. And I love that because it reminds us that there is something, it's just an extreme, and there are strategies that we can pull back from that and recognize this is a sign of a really active brain. That's a great thing to have.
Absolutely.
And if you have this simple strategy of some deep breaths, especially in that test moment, when you're feeling anxious, you can say, okay, I have a really active brain. That's exactly what I need to do to write a test, is a really great brain. But let's just shift gears.
Yeah.
And instead of spinning our wheels, pull it in a little bit and take some deep breaths. So I just love that.
Yeah. And I don't know if you had a chance to watch the Olympics much this year, but if any of you have or did, it was amazing how many times you would see athletes prior to their skating performance or their ski jump or whatever it was that they were doing. They would, if the camera would pan to them, they were there and you could see them going, they literally were taking these big, deep breaths, because we all know it is literally one of the simplest and most effective things that we can do for ourselves in that moment.
I love it. Now, I also want to mention before we go too far that Cher is also the mom of 2 teenagers. And so she knows exactly what she's talking about. And she understands, this busy world that we live in. You're running your business, you're raising a family, you're living life alongside of all of that. And sometimes I feel like people have a misconception that, people who understand the power of a deep breath or talk about being calm have some sort of life that's outside of everyday life. And just to say that's not true. You are living in a busy city that really can be competitive in nature, and here you are recognizing that we need different skills than maybe what we learn in the day-to-day. Can you tell us a little bit, Cher, about what started you on this journey of helping people to connect to their calm?
So I'm not unique in that I've had my greatest lessons in life by going through some of the toughest stuff in life. And sort of how I got started was, it was about 8 years ago, and I physically wasn't well. I was quite sick, and so I went to my doctor, and over a couple of months, I was quite a medical mystery because couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And then, so, when you're at that point, you start to explore, different options, because I really had to find answers. And so I went to this new doctor, and after one very thorough, very long first assessment with her, she said to me, a lot of what is going on in your body can be caused by chronic, long-term, high levels of cortisol. And for those of you that don't know, cortisol is the hormone that our body releases when we are in that stress mode. And so basically, she was telling me that stress had made me sick, or was making me sick. And at first I was like, well, I was in a bit of denial. I was like, what do you mean? I've just got a normal life like everyone else. But then when I started, she was the first person that kind of gave me an answer. So I started to learn a little bit more about stress, because there's positive stress. Like, we need certain levels of stress in our life, right, to perform and achieve, and it's good. But then for everyone, we have a different fine line. There's that fine line between it being positive and it being potentially damaging. And I clearly had crossed the line. So I spent a lot of time learning about, what stress is, how it feels for me and my body, what it looks like. But then more importantly, what can I do to help myself with the fullness and the busyness of my life? And once I started to, and like you had mentioned before, in the beginning, that some of these things felt like a lot of work. Because as you are when you're learning something new, it does feel like a lot of work. But the more you are kind with yourself, the more you are patient with yourself, and the more that you find out what works for you, it can be very simple just to implement some very simple practices to help you in those moments. So that's kind of where things started. Fast forward a few years, my children start getting older, and so they're in school and they start dealing with all the things that they have to deal with. And so I started introducing the techniques to my children. And, it's really been interesting to watch them, question the techniques, explore them, practice them, find out what works for them. And then it was when my eldest started junior high. She was a couple of months into junior high, and she came home from school one day and she said, that stuff that you teach us at home, Mom? I said, yeah. And she said, not a lot of students know about those things. I think you should teach them in schools. I think it could really help. And for me, that was kind of the spark that lit the flames, so to speak. And here I am, 2 years late, almost 2 years now. And I'm really proud of the work that I'm doing in our schools, because the feedback that I'm getting from the school communities that I work with, the counselors, the teachers, and the students themselves, this is information that they're really looking for.
Yes, so incredible. And I love that it was your daughter who was like, go for it, Mom, we need this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
And the schools do a lot of, they are already doing a really great job of teaching our students some of the foundational things, about the importance of, sleep and eating right and exercise and, reaching out and talking about your feelings. And those foundational practices are essential. And then where kind of Connect comes in is I just continue to build on that. And in fact, at the end of our time together, students will have 15 different strategies, 15 different things that they can question, explore, practice, see what works for them, and hopefully find those one or two things that maybe they didn't know about before that can help them in those moments of stress, anxiety, worry, because they are feelings that they are experiencing now, and they will for the rest of their lives, because they're human just like the rest of us. Yeah.
What I love the most about what you said is realizing that you had a normal life like everybody else. So why am I suffering under all of this stress? And I think that is so important. A friend of mine will say, you have to recognize that some people are an orchid and some people are an oak tree. And, I have a very similar story to yours. I thought, why can I not handle this? It seems like everyone else seems to be handling this just fine, but I am not. And recognizing, okay, so maybe I've been treating myself like an oak tree. Like, I just need some rain once in a while. When in fact, perhaps I am more of an orchid and I need a different kind of care. And realizing that was true for me. I need a certain amount of time alone. I need a certain amount of time to just be. I need to have a walk in nature at least once a week to feel like I am me and at my best. And sometimes, especially for teens when they're just figuring themselves out, it's hard to feel like, well, I can see all my friends doing all of these things, but that actually doesn't feel good. And that doesn't have to mean that you can't be a part of those things,
right.
But you just might need some other strategies to help you be able to feel completely yourself.
Yeah. One of my favorite parts of my sessions with the students is in the very beginning, we, talk about how when it comes to emotions, there's no such thing as good ones and bad ones. They're all just part of being human. And so even though unfortunately the world, I think, definitely labels certain ones as bad, they're not. They're normal. They're part of being human. And what matters is how you sort of respond to your emotions, how you work with them and through them, and that you have tools that you can cope. But one of the things that I do very early on in the session is we do this little activity. We have a lot of fun on our site. It's very lighthearted. There's lots of laughs. We have a very good, I think I have a better time sometimes than they do. Yeah, and it's so fun. Anyways, I do this thing where I say, quick show of hands, who here has ever felt, right? So who here has ever felt really happy about something? Let's hands go up. And who here has ever felt? And when I get to things like anxiety, who here has felt anxious? Who has ever felt stressed? Who has ever felt nervous? Everybody puts up their hand. And what I love about that is the looks on their faces. When all of a sudden you have these certain people will start looking around the room, and it's almost like there's this collective sigh of relief. Because all of a sudden they realize they're not the only one. Especially for those students who, for whatever reasons, they're not as comfortable talking about the emotions that they feel. If they are someone who feels anxious or feels stressed, if you feel alone in that, that's really scary. You sometimes think that there's something wrong with you. You start to feel very alone, and then you kind of withdraw from things, when all of a sudden you look around the classroom and realize every single person has their hand up. It is just this beautiful moment of normalizing feelings. And all of a sudden, I think that in itself sometimes is one of the biggest learnings that the students have is, you know what? I'm just like everyone else here. We all go through these feelings. It's just how we express them or how we show them is different.
Yeah, so much of what we see, especially when we spend a lot of time online, is people's beautifully curated lives, right?
Absolutely.
I only post pictures of myself on Instagram when I'm looking good,
Yeah.
Nobody sees me first thing in the morning when my hair's a mess getting out of bed,
It's
and
awful.
yet we compare the outsides, what my friend beautifully describes,
Yes.
the outsides of other people with the insides of ourselves. Like, I do not feel that put together right now.
Yeah. And we often do that, or, people who are the students who are, heavily involved with social media, they often do that the most when they're having a day where on the inside, they're not feeling that great. So you're comparing someone's outsides on their best day with your insides on your worst day. And there's that huge disparity that just makes you feel even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how do we help teens realize that is that's what's happening, and what they can do differently, rather than the go-to strategy of like, I'll just surf on social media at pretty pictures that actually make me feel worse? How do we get them to tap into to recognizing that that's the connection?
Yeah. One of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about in my workshop is the connection between with what we think and how we feel. Because what goes on up here directly creates how we're feeling in here. And so when we do talk about social media, because that is one thing when I ask them, okay, so what are the sources of stress? Okay, in Calgary, you're a high school student. What sorts of things cause you to feel stressed out? And like 10 minutes later, I'm still writing things on the board. They just keep listing and listing and listing. Anyway, social media invariably always shows up. And so we often do spend some time talking about that. And so I said, just be very aware when you are online. First of all, yes, it's completely fun. Yes, you gotta have fun with it. It can be a very positive tool in your life. But when you notice that after spending time online, or when you're spending time online, if all of a sudden you're starting to feel differently about yourself, maybe you're starting to feel a little bit down, you're starting to feel a little bit anxious, you need to kind of tune into that. And the moment you notice that you're feeling something in here, you need to immediately tune into what is going on up here. And we talk about how, our thoughts create our feelings. And we talk about and we practice this notion of noticing your thoughts and paying attention to what you're thinking about. Because the moment you notice the thoughts that are causing you to feel a certain way, the great news is that there's lots of tools that you can do, lots of strategies, or as with the younger students that I work with, lots of games that you can play with your thoughts so that you are able to sort of take those unhelpful thoughts and reframe them so that you don't have that negative emotional response to them.
I love it. It really empowers people to recognize that instead of just feeling like I'm in this wash of emotions that are just happening to me, they can make a change so that things switch over to something more positive.
For many of them, the concept of that you don't have to listen to everything that you think. And just because you think it doesn't mean that it's true. For many of them, our time together is maybe the first time that they're hearing that. And the reason that I feel that is because the looks that they get on their faces when I say it, they're like, what do you mean just because I think it doesn't mean I have to listen to it? And we have a lot of really great dialogue about, yeah, well, imagine if I looked at you and said, wow, you are a unicorn. What do you do? Well, of course I'm not a unicorn. Okay, so let's take that further. And we have those conversations of just really pay attention to the thoughts that you're thinking, because they have a tremendous impact over the emotions that we feel.
I just can't say enough about how important this work is, Cher, and I am so grateful that you're doing this work, and what an advantage that our young people have. I know a couple of years ago I interviewed Cheryl Bradshaw, who is a psychotherapist in Ontario, and she works with college students. And she has described the same thing, college students are learning for the first time that they don't have to listen to the thoughts that they have. And so that has been revolutionary for many of them in supporting their mental health and helping them recognize the pressures of living away from home, being in a university environment. And so I can just appreciate how critically important this is for younger students to learn this early on, because then when their mind starts to ramp up with all of these thoughts that are not supportive, they have an idea of what to do about it and what a significant difference that will make for them in those adolescent years and put them in a good place for adulthood.
It's interesting, when I first had the idea, I started working with some of the health teachers and guidance counselors and sort of principals that I had relationships with to kind of, talk about the idea, what would it look like? And originally, when I first had the idea for the program, I was going to target it specifically at high school students, thinking, I know the pressures, I know the stress that they are under, so I definitely want to target that group. And after having many meetings, especially the guidance counselor, the message that I got loud and clear is, yes, offered in high school, but please start way younger. Because by doing that, then you'll give them kind of those, later elementary years, junior high and high school, lots of time to practice, find out what works for them, question the techniques, explore the techniques, so that when they are in, high school and beyond, they're not just learning about it then, that they have some things, some tools at their disposal to help them through those tumultuous, preteen and teen years.
I love that, because I know so much of, anxiety comes and it just kind of blows us over, and then we don't know what am I supposed to do with this, and how do I keep it in a zone that is manageable and that I can feel like I can cope with it. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you is this. So I'm so grateful that you gave us the strategy of deep breathing in the moment. And my question is, okay, if we can use deep breathing in the moment, is that strategy going to be more effective if we're practicing it in a moment when we're not stressed?
Absolutely. Yeah. The more you can incorporate some sort of deep breathing practices throughout your day, the health benefits are tremendous. Not saying that you need to sit for, 20 minutes, half an hour a day in a yogic cross-legged position and, breathe. If that's what works for you and that's what, connects for you, then absolutely, I welcome you to do that. The reality is that many people, if they think that that's what you have to do, they will tune out. And so it's finding those little moments throughout the day that you can do that. One is so that first of all, you can practice it. It's impossible to learn how to do anything new in a moment when your stress responses are firing. So the more you practice it when you're feeling great, the easier you'll be able to do it, and the more effectively you'll be able to do it in the moments when you need it the most. And then the other beautiful thing about deep breathing is that overall, when you consistently practice it on a regular basis, is that you will be able to influence your overall stress thresholds. So, when I first started and was first introduced to my breath, it didn't take very much to kind of get my stress responses firing. And now now this is years of practice and years of dedicated practice, because this is something that I need to do for my mental and physical health, is now my stress levels, or my thresholds, I guess, are much different now than they were in the beginning.
I love that. And just to kind of go back to your story originally, knowing that it was long-term cortisol, which was
Yeah.
telling you your stress response. And you then learned all of these strategies to be able to manage that. What did you learn about yourself and the healthcare system along that journey? Because I know sometimes when people are in this place of like, I'm really sick, and as you described, I'm a medical mystery,
Yeah.
how can people keep going until they find the answer that seems to be improving their lives?
You know what? And I think the answer to that, I think you actually just answered the question, is just keep going, is keep searching, keep asking questions. And when you go down one path and it's not finding any answers, then just be open to exploring a number of different paths. Because when it comes to our mental and our physical health, there are lots of ways that you can do that. And I absolutely love my family doctor, and he literally did everything that he could for me. I think I had every test I could think of. Like he was my advocate, and we truly did everything together to find out. And ultimately he said, I don't know where else we can go from here. And so I ended up going to a naturopathic doctor, which was something that had never been on my radar. I'd never even considered it before. And so it was me being, I guess, open to exploring a path that I had never traveled before. That's when I found an answer. And so in this journey that I've had, and even in just learning about all of the different practices, like when I learned, let's say, for example, one of the things that we talk about, or two of the practices that we talk about and we practice, everything in our sessions that I talk about, we practice together as a group. So we can feel silly and get the giggles out and ask questions and kind of see what it's like to do this. But when it came to strategies like acupressure, or there's also the strategy or the technique of EFT, emotional freedom technique, otherwise known as tapping. When I first learned about them, I was like, really? Like how, this feels kind of weird, and how could this possibly help me? But at that point in my life, I had nothing to lose. I had everything to gain. And then I started to kind of practice them and see how it worked, only to be completely blown away at how effective these things can be. So I guess if I have any advice, is if you are at a place where you know that you aren't feeling well and you're not getting the answers that you feel are helping you get to where you want to be, is just keep asking questions, knock on lots of different doors, and if you can, be just really open to trying lots of different things to eventually find out what works for you.
I love that. I had a moment of revelation when I was going to get a massage, actually, because probably from carrying one small child on my hips were kind of out of alignment. And she, without even like really moving my muscles at all, was able to adjust them. And I was like, she's like, I know it seems kind of magical. She's like, but the body has no seams.
Yeah.
And
Well,
realizing that, I was like, yes, we are these organic, multi-systemed creatures. And as much as we learn, like in high school biology about the circulatory system and all those systems are also so interconnected, and just recognizing body, mind, and spirit, all of that package. And there are so many avenues in for caring for ourselves. I love the analogy you use too, is, knock on every door until you find the strategies that you can incorporate into your life that will really work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if something doesn't work, if you've tried it and it really doesn't work, then just move on from that. And, that's another thing that I talk about with students is, here, I've given you 15 different things. Okay. And I've tried all of these and I've explored all these and I've spent a lot of time learning about them, but I really kind of have like my top, like 4 or 5 go-tos. And mine are going to be different than what yours would be, Deanne. And what, a 5-year-old student, they're going to have different comfort levels, and a grade 12 student is going to resonate with something different. So, but I wanted to just kind of load them up with options. And so, I'm going to load you up. And then now from here, you've got I'm planting the seeds, I'm giving you the tools. And then now it's up to you to kind of figure out what works best for you.
I love that. One last question, Cher,
Sure.
and I love to hear people's variety of answers on this one. What do you love best about teenagers?
What do I love best about teenagers? I love the place that they are at. I love that they are in this place where they are, every day is a discovery. They are discovering new learnings every day when they go to school. They are discovering about friendships. They are discovering about, their place in the world and where do they fit and what do they want to do with their lives. And it's such a time of excitement, discovery, learning about the world, learning about themselves. There's lots of laughter, there's lots of fun, but also with that, there's lots of drama. I've got 2 teenage daughters in my home, so there's a lot of emotions in my home, but that's life. And with life, there's ups and downs. There's things that feel great. There's things that feel really awkward and uncomfortable. But it's a real time of their curiosity about things, their energy and enthusiasm about things, and their passion and zest for life. I find very inspiring and exciting to be around.
Beautiful. Now, if you are watching and you're in Calgary, you can click on the links. Well, anyone can click on the links and see Cher's workshops, but I encourage you, if you're in Calgary, to click on the links and you could see Cher live and appreciate one of her workshops right here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And this will be such an incredible benefit to you and the teams that you are working with, the teams that you love, to really give them that edge of understanding how to live their best life. So thank you, Cher, so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Deanne.
And thank you to everyone who's taken the time to watch. We appreciate you being here. And I challenge you to do another session of deep breathing and really give yourself the gift of a few minutes of connecting to your calm. Okay, everyone, until next time, bye-bye.